Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's webinar. It's focused on youth, young people, health, and the planet, and empowering youth through integrated development. My name is Cassandra Jesse. I'm the Director of YouthPower Learning, representing Making Sense International and the International Center for Research on Women. The webinar today is hosted by YouthPower Learning and the PACE project. Just a little bit about YouthPower Learning. We generate and disseminate knowledge about the implementation and impact of positive youth development and cross-sectoral approaches in international development. We lead research, evaluations, and events designed to build the evidence base and inform all of us in this global community about how to help young people pursue their aspirations, empower them to contribute to and benefit from the creation of a more peaceful and prosperous community. We manage youthpower.org and youthlead.org, which are key platforms for advancing positive youth development and engaging young people, as well as foster 4 communities of practice. YouthPower Learning also provides evidence and evaluation support to USAID and its missions through youth assessments, evaluations, research, training, strategy, and program design. So I've introduced myself. I'd like to pass it over to our moderator and one of our presenters for today. Smita, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Smita Gaith, and I am a policy advisor at Population Reference Bureau, where I work on the PACE project. So PACE stands for Policy Advocacy and Communications Enhanced for Population and Reproductive Health. And the PACE project works to ensure that family planning, reproductive health, and population issues are included in policies and programs as keys to sustainable and equitable economic growth and development. So the PACE project has 3 main result areas, and one of those result areas or focuses is to increase commitments for multi-sectoral approaches to integrate population, health, environment, resilience, food security, livelihoods, and security programs. And this focus really inspires and informs our work on population health and environment approaches and our interest in co-hosting this webinar today. So during this webinar, you'll learn about the Positive Youth Development Framework and the population health and environment approaches, and how these 2 frameworks can support and inform each other. To illustrate these points, you'll be hearing today from Cassandra Jesse, who is the Director of YouthPower Learning, which is, as you know, a USAID-sponsored program. So Cassandra leads efforts to generate and disseminate knowledge about the implementation and impact of positive youth development and cross-sectoral approaches in international youth development, and oversees efforts to build the evidence base and inform the global community about how to successfully transition young people into productive, healthy adults. Also joining me today is Modest Kinawa. He's a project coordinator for the Health of People and Environment in the Lake Victoria Basin, or HOPE LVB project, which is led by Pathfinder International. Modest has over 5 years of experience implementing integrated population health and environment, or PHE programs, and working towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So starting us off today, Cassandra will start to talk a little bit more about the Positive Youth Development Framework, sectoral applications, and more.
Thanks, Smita. As she said, I'm going to talk about what is positive youth development, or PYD, in our field that absolutely seems to love the alphabet soup. When Smita and I connected about a year ago around her population health and environment work, I was really impressed by the integrated and multi-sectoral approach. What I found surprising, however, was that PYD was not an articulated approach in the PHE field. Given its holistic and human-centered approach, PHE already embraces the philosophy of PYD, and I believe there's a great opportunity to apply the evidence of what works in PYD to better engage and support young people in PHE programming. So first, I wanted to start us off with why youth. Each of us on this webinar are committed to working with young people by the nature of our work. We recognize that youth are important to development and to the well-being of our countries, and they are, as the cliche says, the future. But are we really acknowledging the critical role youth play in development? Do we have a strategic and intentional focus on youth? I would like you to walk away with a key takeaway that our approach to youth must reflect the multifaceted dimensions of youth. It must include them not just as beneficiaries, but as stakeholders in their development and that of their community. And we really have a choice. We can see youth as assets or vulnerabilities, see them as challenges or resources with great potential. And the way that we perceive young people will impact the success of our work with them and determine whether they will thrive or struggle. And furthermore, how one transitions through adolescence and early adulthood has lifelong consequences for that individual, for their community, and society writ large. Part of the theory of change around why PYD is the importance of youth for development. However, as USAID's youth coordinator, Michael McCabe, makes clear in the strategic imperative of youth, we have two paths ahead. As he says, one where youth are purposely engaged and supported with age and developmentally appropriate opportunities that leverage their creativity, aspirations, and desire for purpose and belonging. This builds individual well-being and stimulates social change and economic growth. The other road, and unfortunately the one that we currently face, fails to see youth as change agents to address their unique needs and interests at this key moment. As a result, disaffected youth may be excluded from opportunities, leading to apathy and risking destabilization. This may slow gains made from investments and advancements in education, employment, health, and civic participation programming. And I think Mike would probably add environment, recognizing that key element. Poverty will continue to hold back development without inclusive, broad-based, and sustainable growth policies that engage youth socially and economically. So building on a demographic dividend that youth provide, investing in youth and taking a PYD approach offers a critical opportunity to improve development outcomes. So what is PYD? Well, many of those on this webinar have seen this. YouthPower Learning developed a definition of positive youth development and a framework for USAID and for those of us working in the low and middle income country context. So I'm going to just make sure everybody feels grounded in it. Positive youth development engages, and that's the key word, youth along with their families, communities, and/or governments so that youth are empowered to reach their full potential. PYD approaches build skills, assets, and competencies, foster healthy relationships, strengthen the environment, and transform systems. Now note, this definition can be broadly applied across age groups, and for USAID, they look at 10 to 29. Youth have different developmental stages, and they rapidly change through their social, emotional, and cognitive skills across these age ranges. And this definition is intended to capture that broad umbrella. So think of visionary terms around skills, relationships, environments, and systems. We should interpret those quite broadly. You'll see the framework there alongside the definition, and it includes 4 domains focused on key constructs about positive youth development that contribute to healthy, productive, and engaged youth. So at the top, you really think about assets. What are the skills that young people need to bring to bear, and what do they have in their sort of toolbox to help them on their journey for their own development? What is their ability to leverage those skills and those assets that they have? And that's the agency that they're bringing. What are the contributions that they are bringing for themselves and for their community? And what does that surrounding enabling environment look like? And really thinking about from physical assets to relational assets, normative elements. And so there's a lot in that enabling environment and a lot that we're actually working on. Positive youth development is both an approach and a philosophy, and it helps us understand the kinds of policies, opportunities, and supports young people need to thrive. And there are several research-based principles that are key to positive youth development. Really, there's a focus on strengths and positive outcomes. Instead of taking a deficit-based approach, which is what happened in the 70s and 80s, we're intentionally helping young people to build their strengths and develop develop their competencies. And it really focuses holistically on the enabling environment around young people. Youth voice and engagement are essential elements of PYD. Youth are valued partners who have meaningful decision-making roles in programs and communities. We work with young people, not for them. Strategies that involve all youth, not just those that are gifted and not just those that are at high risk, although we do have to recognize where targeting and tailoring is important for those that fall into different groups that need different intersection points. Community involvement and collaboration is essential, right? Positive youth development includes youth programming, but it must reach beyond just young people. It's about system change, community change, organizational change, and recognizing we all have a role to play. And the last one, in thinking about long-term commitment, is a challenging one in our project-based space, but we need to recognize the developmental progression of young people, the building blocks, and working on building those connections of commitment over time to supporting them. One of the advantages of positive youth development is we know from high-income countries that PYD interventions impact multiple sectors and have multiple positive outcomes. They've been more efficient as an approach than addressing each outcome in separate interventions. And then those of you who are coming from the PHE space, this should sound familiar. Integrated programs can achieve more than the sum of the individual parts. For those who aren't familiar, YouthPower Learning was tasked to conduct a systematic review to understand how have PYD approaches been implemented in low and middle income countries and what the evidence says about their effectiveness. So this slide kind of gives a smattering of the different ways that you could learn some specifics from that research. It provides roadmaps for thinking about promising practices for effective field implementation. We disaggregated information by data and sector, trying to illuminate different findings, and we focused around workforce readiness, employability, SRH, HIV, democracy and governance. So there were quite a few sectors there. You will notice, though, that a prominent sector for PHE programs that is missing on this is environment. And I want to sort of flag that because I think there's a significant opportunity as PHE programs would be integrating a PYD approach intentionally to really be able to learn about what is the evidence in the environmental space. A couple other global findings from our research is thinking about the low identification of positive youth development programs. So because PYD programs are occurring and seem to be occurring organically, but not under the guidance of existing literature and practice, we're not maximizing the building on evidence to improve our programming. And I think this is a real opportunity for PHE programs to think intentionally about how positive youth development can be integrated. This infographic sort of highlights some of the key findings, and I think the takeaway from it is PYD programs in low and middle income countries demonstrated important developmental outcomes, improved soft skills and self-efficacy to improved health, livelihoods, education, gender, and violent reduction outcomes. And so there's a lot that can be offered by taking these holistic cross-sectoral type approaches. I want to flag just a couple of resources for you. We need evidence that we can trust, and so we need to be able to measure what we're doing. The systematic review found a lot of programs were not measuring positive youth development, although they did measure those sector-specific outcomes. We recognize that we can only learn about PYD programs if we are measuring it, and so to that end, our team had developed a positive youth development measurement toolkit to provide guidance and resources for implementers of youth programs for integrating those principles in their M&E systems and then measuring those outputs. So I want to encourage you to check out some of these resources here. And we like to conclude with a bit of a call to action. You know, why should I care? We know that evidence in high-income countries is strong and that PYD strategies can prevent a wide range of negative outcomes, increase positive outcomes from youth, but they are sparse in low and middle income countries. And you have an opportunity to be able to add to that evidence, which can make decisions about your own programs and ensuring the quality of your programs, lead to community buy-in, and actually help amplify sort of the larger community in that space. It has the potential to improve lives, but only if we know what works. And to that end, we developed a positive youth development learning agenda to guide evaluators, implementers, and donors to focus their investments in knowledge generation and advance the field of positive youth development. It's a global one. It was developed by us in a very collaborative process, but it is meant for all of those who fund, design, implement, or evaluate youth programs. There's 5 key themes in this learning agenda: understanding how PYD programs achieve positive impacts in low and middle income countries, the cross-sectoral impact of PYD programs, the third one's around measurement of PYD constructs, a fourth around positive youth development for vulnerable and marginalized populations, and finally, youth engagement in PYD programs. So there's sort of these sub-questions in here and sub-questions to those. And this agenda needs you to come alive, for it to come alive. It's an unfunded learning agenda in that our role is as developers, and we as the developers are not tasked specifically for doing the research to answer these questions. Rather, we are the curator and amplifier of the learning that comes from the broader community like yourself. And so if this resonates with the work that you're doing, please contact us and we can talk about how we can connect your work and amplify it in this agenda. And so with that, let me pass it to Smita.
Thank you. I just wanted to present shortly, briefly on what the PHE approach is and some of its benefits. Before I get into that, I just wanted to mention, Cassandra mentioned that we kind of started engaging about a year ago, and that collaboration or engagement emerged from a policy brief that the PACE project produced about PHE approaches. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to find that brief online later, but that brief is titled Population, Health, and Environment Approaches Enhance Youth Leadership and Development, and a lot of what I'll be talking about today comes from that brief. So what is the population, health, and environment approach? So for all the PHE folks on the line, this may sound redundant, but for everybody else, PHE programs are integrated approaches that improve access to health services, especially family planning and reproductive health, at the same time while helping communities manage natural resources, conserve biodiversity, and balance the critical ecosystems that they depend on. These programs can be customized to fit the needs of the communities that they're implemented in, and at the most basic level, they typically address family planning and reproductive health needs and other primary health needs. And that really enables communities to also be able to prioritize conservation, natural resource management, and related issues like sustainable livelihoods and food security, which are also closely tied to natural resource management. PHE programs recognize the different ways that human health, population dynamics, and the environment interact. So, for example, in a really rural or remote community, people may not have access to health services or especially family planning and reproductive health services. And so that can drive unmet need for family planning, which can contribute to population growth, which can further drive unsustainable environmental practices that can impact health and economic outcomes, and place pressure on social sector services like education and healthcare. People also depend on their local environment for ecosystem services like food or timber, flood protection. Maybe their local environment brings in tourism funds. And so PHE programs do a great job at recognizing that people don't really live their lives in silos, and their challenges don't exist in silos either. And like I mentioned before, a lot of these projects take place in rural communities um, where where these challenges are particularly evident. So why is PHE such a great way to work? Um, a lot of the information on this slide comes from the Evidence Project, which produced a working paper in 2015. And what that desk review found is that integrated projects do a great job, PhD projects do a great job at transforming gender roles and norms. So for example, one of the findings was that male participation in reproductive health and family planning conversations increases. Women sometimes have more opportunities to earn income or get involved in natural resource management. These projects can also be cost efficient for organizations and time efficient for communities because a lot of the costs are being shared, the interventions are being packaged, and people are getting more of like a one-stop shop, or they're getting more messages from fewer places. The projects are also truly community driven, so they are usually developed with input from the community, and so they're very responsive to the community's own identified priorities and needs. Also, really important is that these projects have potential to improve equity because they are reaching rural communities. One of the anecdotes that I've heard is that a PhD project that was taking place in Madagascar actually ended up identifying communities living in areas of the country where the government did not actually have records of people living. And so these projects really are reaching the so-called last mile in terms of communities. And finally, the integrated nature of these projects often leads to greater uptake of efforts related to health or conservation because they're packaged with other benefits like small income generation. And so these are just some of the reasons why integrating population health and environment can be so successful. So why are we talking about young people? One of the findings that we came across when we were doing the desk research for the brief is that in countries where PhD projects are taking place, the youth population between ages 10 to 29 can represent almost 40% of the population. And we have highlighted that on this map. And so in addition to the need to support the development of this large youth population, these countries also have urgent environmental needs that might be related to water conservation or natural resource management, sustainable use of forests and fisheries, and a lot of other needs that are identified in the Sustainable Development Goals. So PhD projects can address these needs by introducing or facilitating environmentally sustainable livelihoods, and also strengthening the skills and knowledge of communities to sustainably manage resources. And like Cassandra mentioned, youth are critical to driving the demographic dividend, and so investing in them and making sure that they have the skills and knowledge and a supportive environment are key. So how do PhD projects benefit young people? Well, like I said, youth constitute a large share of the world's population. According to the UN, 33% of the world's population is between the ages of 10 to 29. But we know that young people in the most rural areas have needs that differ from young people in urban areas. And they're not necessarily getting the health services or education or training that they need to succeed. So PhD projects use a variety of methods to engage young people across sectors to help them gain the skills and knowledge related to health, livelihoods, and being able to contribute to their communities. Some of the things that these projects are doing are using peer education or engaging young people in livelihoods training, using the media like radio or dramas, community dramas, and using existing governance structures like community forest associations or beach management units or fishery associations. And a lot of these methods, a lot of these projects are engaging young people, but they're not necessarily doing so considering positive youth development. So they're not necessarily being mindful. And we do talk a little bit more about that in the PACE policy brief. So not only can PhD projects be beneficial to young people and engage young people, but engaging young people can actually drive success of PhD projects. So involving young people adds to the project's priorities and encourages sustainability because you're working with emerging leaders or current leaders in the community. It also produces sectoral benefits. So our desk research found that there are benefits to health. So engaging young people early through PhD projects helps to establish long-term behavior changes that become normalized over time. Young people, the stigma around voluntary family planning can be reduced, and it enables young people to delay and space their pregnancies. It reduces the number of births, especially dangerous births, and it can improve household health. We also see benefits to agriculture. So a lot of PhD projects will introduce sustainable livelihoods in agriculture, which helps young people develop confidence, leadership skills, and teamwork skills because they're working in associations. And so by using associations like farmers groups, PhD projects create an opportunity for young people to enter farming or other livelihoods and contribute to environmentally sustainable pathways to improved food security. This is also related to livelihoods and employment. So PhD projects can develop a lot of technical and leadership skills and improve entrepreneurial capacity. So sectors like agribusiness present an opportunity to generate jobs for young people, assuming that they have the skills and the traits they need to succeed, which are often provided through PhD projects. And projects usually train young people as assistants or create opportunities for them to develop sector-specific skills. And that can really prepare young people for the workforce. And finally, we see improvements in participation in governance. So a lot of projects will include young people in project design and help them participate in, or like grant them entry into community groups like beach management units, which manage coastal fishing, community savings groups, farmers associations. And when young people are invited to participate in decision making, it can lead to improvement in civic engagement. It can lead to mentorship opportunities. And young people become more active in their communities as educators. So they, through the mentorship, they learn how to advocate to decision makers, and they also earn respect from their community, their fellow community members. The one thing that we did see is that PhD projects are not consistently measuring positive youth development indicators to demonstrate how youth engagement is benefiting the sectoral outcomes. And to truly measure and understand the benefits of youth engagement across sectors, PhD projects do need to be a little bit more intentional about including young people and including monitoring and evaluation for youth-focused outcomes. And that can include quantitative and qualitative measurement. And one of the resources that I came across in the process of doing the research was the Positive Youth Development Measurement Toolkit, which I thought was a really great resource to explain how to integrate, measure, and evaluate positive youth development. And by applying stronger monitoring and evaluation, PhD project implementers will be able to better communicate the value of integrating projects for young people to government stakeholders and other civil society partners. So with that, I'll jump to my recommendations. What can policymakers, advocates, and PhD implementers do? First, we recommend that they invest in and scale up these multi-sectoral approaches to strengthen youth development. So national and subnational programs or institutions that are dedicated to young people's growth and well-being can institutionalize these approaches. And the investment can create a stronger enabling environment for young people. It can help address young people's range of needs and interests, including reproductive health and employability. In a lot of countries, there are policies that call for multi-sectoral collaboration, but those are policies that don't necessarily have a mandate. They serve more as guidance, and they're not necessarily being implemented. And so governments can start making cross-sector investments that will benefit young people and improve multi-sectoral outcomes. Second, we recommend being intentional about addressing PYD in project design. So national and subnational decision makers and implementers have an opportunity to include youth-facing interventions and activities, and to recognize that these activities will benefit the current and next generation of leaders with strong personal attributes and technical skills that will lead to better outcomes for different sectors. And third, we should consider strengthening monitoring and evaluation and sharing the impacts of PhD projects on young people. So by improving M&E to capture the different indicators and capture the benefits and impacts of projects on young people, we can demonstrate how these projects are specifically contributing to youth development and well-being. And implementers should be deliberate about involving young people and understanding that youth involvement does affect long-term project success. And policymakers do need evidence and sustained advocacy to recognize and act on the value of multi-sectoral approaches, and so stronger M&E can contribute to that. So to learn more, we, like I said, did produce a policy brief on this topic, and that is available at the PACE project. I also encourage folks to check out PRB's People Health Planet program, under which these materials were produced. And for people who are interested, we have a global population environment development newsletter. It goes out once a month. It has 5 or 6 resources, interesting articles, opportunities that are relevant to the PED community, but also all sectors that are related to that. And also an easy way to stay engaged is to follow us on Twitter. So our Twitter handle is @AfricaPHE. Yeah, and I hope this was informative to the non-PhD folks out there. So I'll hand it over to Modest from Pathfinder. He'll be talking a little bit more about the Hope LVB project to provide a little context for what this actually looks like in real life.
Yes. Thank you, Smita. Hi, everyone. My name is Modest Kinawa, Reproductive Health Coordinator for Hope LVB, which is implemented in Kenya and Uganda. The Hope LVB project is an integrated PHE project that has 3 objectives. And objective 1 looks at improving uptake of essential sexual and reproductive health, maternal, newborn, and child health, and integrated HIV and malaria services among populations living in the project site by July 2019. And objective 2 looks at increasing the community capacity to sustainably manage natural resources, to increase food security, improve livelihoods, and balance ecosystems and human health in Hope LVB sites by July 2019. And the third objective looks at utilizing the emerging PHE policy framework in the Lake Victoria Basin to support health system strengthening and natural resources management, and scale up the PHE integration in Kenya and Uganda sites. The Hope LVB project builds on the strength of the community in partnership with local government and NGOs. And the project design is holistic in nature. It is designed to improve the quality of life of communities that depend on the environment and also productivity of the forest and the lake ecosystem. It emphasizes being more aware and able to take care of reproductive health needs and the environment, And the project also integrates reproductive health and family planning into resource management. This slide shows the sites where Hope LVB is implemented. In Uganda, we are working in 2 districts of Wakiso and Mayuge, in the islands of Jaguzi, Busi, and Bwonda. Then in Kenya, we are working in 2 counties, Siaya County and Homa Bay, in the areas of Suba, Ndiwa, Rachonyo, and Bondo. And this project has been implemented in 3 phases. Phase 1 ran from 2011 to 2014, phase 2 from 2015 to 2017, and then phase 3. And we've had funding from USAID, MacArthur, Packard, and this phase 3 is being funded by Winslow and Cargill Foundation. So what were the PHE challenges in the Lake Victoria Basin? These are some of the many challenges: teenage pregnancies and early marriages, high school dropout rates, maternal deaths and maternal morbidity, water-washed, water-related illnesses, open defecation sites that usually contributed to the usual cholera outbreaks, deforestation, illegal fishing practices, land ownership issues, and depending on the lake as the only source of livelihood. In the Lake Victoria Basin, this region has a very big population of young people, and their needs actually cut across all spheres of life, looking at livelihoods, education, ability to be recognized in communities, being able to influence decision making. And we're looking at how Hope LVB was incorporating youth input and needs. And as a project we've worked with existing structures so that we implement the activities. Of course, we started with the end in mind, that if the project stopped today, what happens? And organized these youths into functional groups with the leadership structures and trained them on group dynamics. Used like the games basically to demonstrate PH interconnectedness, and linked these youth groups to government livelihood schemes. And these are government programs that are looking at supporting young people, like the Community-Driven Development Fund, the Operation Wealth Creation that is being given by government. Youth leaders have contributed to project activities. We've had where the youth have led wash campaigns that have resulted into closure of open defecation sites. And this is evident when you go to health facilities and you see reduced cases of diarrheal cases, young people participating in commercial tree nurseries, establishment and management, youth being engaged into energy saving stoves and contribute to forestry conservation. They also have other activities like apiary, youth people being models, and they use the PHE champion way to pass on PHE messages to the rest of the communities. And what have we realized? What have we accomplished as Hope LVB in the Lake Basin region? We've seen an increase in the uptake of services at health facilities, including deliveries. By the time we started working in these regions, facilities could conduct like 2 deliveries in a month, 2 to 5. And as we talk now, deliveries have improved from 4 to 40, 50 deliveries per facility per month. We've had 60 community bylaws that are linked to PHE being approved at district level and also adopted by the member states of the East African community. Also, we've seen the PHE strategy being adopted by these very member states so that they can inform their programming. We've had 44 fishing breeding sites being established and protected, 680,000 trees planted, trees of different species, including also agroforestry trees that have improved household incomes, improved wash indicators, and use of composting manure as opposed to inorganic manure. We've also seen the youth getting engaged into table banking activities, and this keeps them together and move on. Young people are also organized into saving groups. We have one success story about the youth circle. It is a youth circle that started with 20 people and it has now grown to more than 500 active members. They started with only 200,000 shillings as their base capital. And as we talk now of May 23rd, 2019, their capital base has been able to grow to 149 million Uganda shillings. And they are able to give loans to other youths in the communities. Being fishermen, being islanders, they give testimony that they were long ago looked at as people who are credit unworthy. So they could not benefit any financial loaning services from the government. And this is the reason as to why they came up as youth to come up with a circle so that they can support themselves. We've also had vegetable projects at a household level for young mothers, for the women groups, just to also improve livelihood, food security, and nutrition at a household level. We've also seen the sub-counties, the counties supporting these youth groups and linking them to benefit from what I said, the community-driven fund. As I talk now, we have more than 30 community youth groups that have benefited from this fund, and this money is directed to improve, scale up their projects, income generating projects as well. About gender norms, what we've realized, what has changed in the community, a lot has changed in how men take themselves, how they engage in dialogues with their spouses, how they talk about issues of family planning, reproductive health, and also seeing many men accompanying their wives, their spouses to health facilities for ANC, but also them getting involved into family planning knowledge, knowing that it is the right of the woman to decide to have a choice about the family planning method she would like to have or use. And young people have held trainings and public talks and emerged as leaders. We have youth leaders who have taken up key positions in the communities, and this has been as a result of being empowered, speak up, to get engaged into productive activities, and through that, they have gained trust from the communities, and they are able to move on. About sustainability, I said that when we were starting the project, we were looking at beginning with the end in mind. We're looking at the end it all, how do we scale up the good interventions? And this is why at every step of implementation, we worked together with all the structures so that they understand what we do, so that they adopt. And we've seen in many of these sub-counties, the districts, the PH intervention is being incorporated into the 5-year development work plan. And through that, we see that the good PH interventions can be scaled up. We've also seen adoption of the PHE strategy into the East African policies, and each member state is pushing up the PHE agenda. Yes, thank you so much. Hear about a community person.
Thank you so much, Modest. So for our listeners on the line, we recently interviewed a young man from the Hope LVB community who unfortunately was not able to join us today. But we do have a clip from his interview of what he saw as some of the benefits that he experienced and how this was a transformative experience for him.
For us as we youth, the leaders, we are again continuing to teach in different community, different people, things regarding health, and then environment, HIV and malaria, and we are ever teaching those people and even process the records. Whenever we find any victim in any given place, we tend to refer him or her to the health facilities and the VHTs to assist him or her in case of any problem. So we are seeing it that it is also another empowering, because we are empowering and creating, reducing the stigma cases that was in the youth before the whole project came in here in the island.
Great. So that's just one voice. Modest, I'm not sure if you have other, are there other short anecdotes or examples that you have at this time of stories like that?
Oh, yes. I'll talk about the young mother I met when I started working in the islands. She was 19 years old and already had 3 children. And she was saying she started giving birth at the age of 15. So every time, every year, she was already carrying a baby. And she was saying she had no information about how to go about all that. And she could not get engaged in economic activities at the household level. She was saying her husband could not invite her maybe to a round table discussion and talk about things to do with the family, things to do with the development, citing that she had nothing to offer in terms of supporting the a budget, maybe a daily household budget, since she wasn't working and all the time she was dealing with babies. But then after the project, this lady has come out to give testimony that she has been able now to space her children. She has had time to engage in income generation. She has had time to engage with other young mothers and come up with activities. And as young mothers, they were able to start up like vegetable projects. They have started up liquid soap making. They have started up table banking, which is done on every Sunday. So through doing all this, she's able to save some money. She's now empowered financially, and this has given her an opportunity to win that space of discussing couple issues at home, at household. So she says this is something that our community has admired about the Young Mothers Group, and they have been linked to several young mothers in this community. This young girl too is also linked to the circle, and she has been able to save through the youth circle. She has benefited from the circle to support her income. Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, we have a couple of questions that are coming in. Modest, someone had a question that I think would be most relevant for you to answer. So she said that it seems that youth are really leading the change on issues of the environment. And so in your experience, what have you seen as some of the main needs of the youth-led organizations or the young leaders in the Hope community to make a difference in their communities? So are there any skills, tools, or resources that have been particularly helpful for these youth-led efforts?
Oh, yes. First of all, was how you get to engage the youth and actually to know what their desires are. So through the way we are working the PHE game, it's a kind of game that opens up the youth understanding about their challenges in the community and also helps them think outside the box on how the simple steps they can take to address such challenges and also know which skills they require to do that. So we built on what they already knew and what skills they desired and supported them. At first, they were so reluctant about tree planting because it could not yield money so soon. And they had other activities they suggested that can bring in money quickly. And these included like the vegetable projects to combine with the tree planting activities. So they identified tree nurseries as one of the long-term activity that can empower them financially, and they realized that they lacked the skills on how to establish these tree nurseries and how to manage. And our training focused also around there to capacity build them on how to start tree nurseries and how to manage them. And as I talk now, over the 5-6 years, they have been able to market their trees. At first, they were just hiring land where they were doing all that, but they have been able to buy 5 acres of land and do a PHE demonstration site. So from this demonstration site, they are able to earn a living from even people who come to learn about PHE, people who want trees of different species, fruit trees, and all that. Yeah.
Thank you. So another question that came in, Modest, I'm sorry to bombard you, but could you talk a little bit, are young people in Hope engaged on a volunteer basis? Are they formally employed? How are you engaging young leaders?
Oh, yes, thank you. The young people are engaged, they are doing voluntary work, but from the activities they are engaged in, at the end of it all, it has been able to pay them off. Like at first, we reached out to them, asked for what they would like to do, and did training for them in those specific areas. They were also picked out as PHE champions, so they were doing message passing on to other people as PHE champions. But also, they have been able to work as model households. And the model household looks at a holistic way of empowering a household in terms of environmental conservation, in terms of health, in terms of income generation. So it turned out to be not voluntary anymore, since they are earning from the PHE activities that they are involved in. For example, if someone is involved in agroforestry, fruit tree growing, is giving information to the neighbors, to the community about the benefits of this, but at the end of it all, he has to harvest and sell the surplus from the projects that he does. So this is actually how we've been able to move this project that it is in its own way sustainable, since it has that livelihood contribution to a household, to the youth. Yes.
Thanks, Modest. We do have a couple of questions that I think, Cassandra, you could probably be in a good position to answer. So, for example, are there strategies that you recommend to build rapport with funders that are resistant to the idea of young people as leaders? I know some people feel that young people either don't have the skills or don't have a true interest, or do you feel that there are strategies that make funders particularly amenable to the idea of engaging young people or investing in them?
Yeah, actually, one of our communities of practice around youth engagement who's really focused on how do we make the case that youth have the assets to solve the problems that they face in their communities. So I'll encourage you to check out some of the resources within the youth engagement community of practice. They did a tips around what's important for youth engagement, and another one for really making some of those advocacy points. But I think some of the takeaway is even reflecting on youth as innovators. Think about from the Steve Jobs to the Zuckermans, right? The Zuckerberg, sorry, and some of our technology innovators, and the comfortableness that young people have with thinking about innovation and advancement using technology. I think there's a lot to capitalize on, and a lot of energy and excitement and investment they have in what their future is going to bring. And so I think there is being able to highlight some of the examples of where young leaders have been successful in putting forward strategies that are helpful to community and as a starting block, and then continuing to engage around.
Yeah, I agree. I think I know PACE has done some work also to respond to this person's question around building on the skills that young people already have. Like you said, they do have the knowledge of what young people want and need in their local context. So I agree with you. I think sometimes young people are they are the best voices for future investments. Modest, I wonder if you could explain a little bit about what the most effective ways were or have been to engage young people on youth. And do you have any lessons that you've learned or that Hope has taken away on how to effectively engage young people?
Oh, yes, thank you. Actually, the most effective way to engage young people, how we've seen it with Hope LVB, is first of all to go through the recognized structures in the community. These are structures for the community development officers, the health facilities, the local leadership, the opinion leaders in the community, because they know most of the challenges the youth face. And if there are any organized or groups for the youth, they have details about them. But also, most importantly, is reaching out to the very youth and talking with them, and not only working for them, but working with them to identify, just facilitating them identify ways to go through the challenges and what they think about all that. So I would say specifically we've been able, by engaging them directly as youth, and not only just citing what to do for them, but them coming out with ideas about what they want to. Yes.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. So thank you so much, Modest, for answering that question. For all of our listeners, I do want to let you know we have hit our 1 hour mark, and so just in the interest of respecting everyone's time, we will be concluding the webinar. For everyone who has asked a question that has not yet been answered, I do want to let you know that we will, when the recording is shared, we will work to answer some of those questions in writing.
And following up on Jean, we will go ahead and send a resource document with a list of links, including functional ones, that are of resources that we mentioned during this webinar. Just really quick on just how we can partner together. I think one of the opportunities that even both of our projects have is thinking about ways to be able to contribute and build on each other's work. So we here at YouthPower Learning are a hub and a space for really learning about positive youth development. So come visit us on youthpower.org. Contribute to that PYD learning agenda that we mentioned. There's a lot of resources online. Send us things that you believe could help advance the field. And I think there's a real ripe opportunity for PHE projects to be able to contribute to advancing positive youth development itself. Or if you're under the age of 35, come join us on youthlead.org and a dynamic space for engaging as young people. And for those who are not members of our communities of practice, we have 4 different communities that have different sectoral lenses, but are really all grounded in advancing youth development. So join us there. And we look forward to seeing you in some event in the near future.
Yes. And just to answer other questions, just so you know, the recording will be shared, and we will answer the unanswered questions that we did not get to today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.